traditions. And the way I see peace building or peacemaking in my tradition is twofold. One is scriptural and one is theological. From a scriptural perspective, we go back to the Rig Veda, the oldest extant religious text in the world. It's hard to date it because it's an oral tradition, but 1,500 years before Christ, maybe even older. And in that text, it says, truth is one, but the wise call truth by many names. Or you can interpret it, God is one, but the wise call God by many names. That is a core concept within Hinduism. And the way I was raised was, there are many paths up the mountain, but they all go to the same place. Different strokes for different folks, but we're all on a similar journey. So built within the concept of modern Hinduism is this notion of pluralism and inclusivity. Hinduism is not an evangelical tradition, it's not an exclusivist tradition. It has the remarkable ability to absorb the traditions that it comes into contact with. The Upanishads, for example, are our great philosophical treatises. Well, we have an Upanishad to Allah. Jesus, for Hindus, is a great saint, a great yogi, avatar. We have a very similar concept of the divine coming down to earth in our avatars. Buddha is considered an avatar of Vishnu. So Hinduism is creative in how it meets and encounters and incorporates other religious traditions into its fold. And I think that gives us a structure of peace building because of the acknowledgement of a non-exclusive truth. The other, and that's why when you go to India, you'll find Hindus visiting all houses of worship, regardless of faith traditions, because I believe Hindus, like Baha'is, for example, see the value of truth within different traditions. From a theological perspective, Hindus believe in the individual soul, the Atman, and its relationship with what you might call a Godhead or a universal soul, a universal consciousness, Brahman, that divinity is represented in all of us, that our soul is a reflection of the divine, that our natures are inherently divine. So a traditional Indian greeting or Hindu greeting is namaste, hands together in prayer-like form. Literally means the divinity within me acknowledges and salutes the divinity within you. Very different than a Western handshake. I have no weapon, I will not kill you, right? So even within something as simple as a greeting, we see a core theological belief that all of our natures are inherently divine. When people come back from India, they ask me, why do you guys worship the elephant? Why do you worship this, why do you worship the monkey? Why do you worship the cow? Because they see images of the divine that take the form of many different animals. And it's not that for Hindus, the God is a monkey or God is an elephant or God is a cow, but that there is God in the monkey, there is God in the elephant, there is God in the cow. So when we represent that it's not just humans, but all sentient beings have an inherently divine nature, when we see the multiplicity of divinities within the world that's all connected with an overarching universal divinity, I think we have within the tradition itself a very powerful methodology for engagement, for pluralism, for peace building that recognizes that your religion is as good for you as my religion is as good for me. So I think both from a scriptural perspective and a theological perspective, the Hindu tradition offers these approaches to peace building that aren't just Hindu perspectives. I believe that they're perspectives for all faith traditions and cultures to examine and perhaps incorporate.
Thank you. I just have a Twitter note. If any of you are tweeting, we're hashtag Muslim Peace for the conference. So I'm just, for the two of you that are tweeting in the audience. So Dr. Clayton, so there's this, we've heard a lot about the abstractions of peace, the articulation of justice as a methodology for actualizing peace, and also the notion of an inclusivity of how we view creation itself as a way of unity through peace. So what would you say your tradition, is there a unique component that you would add to this discussion around the conception of divine and the actualization of peace?
It strikes me that it would be wrong for the Christian speaker simply to begin with theory and abstractions, because for a religion supposedly followers of a peaceful rabbi, it has wrought more violence upon the world than perhaps any other tradition represented at this table. It would seem to me crucial to admit the degree to which people acting in the name of this peaceful rabbi, acting in the name of Christ, have wrought violence and harm upon the planet. One, we can raise the notion of peace, Najiba. I think the first Christian doctrine that should be spoken of is the doctrine of sin. That humans fall short of the image of God. probably one of the best evidence, maybe the best evidence of humans falling short of the God whom we worship and follow. The call for Christians would be to admit how far it has fallen from its rabbi and to find its way back with humility to the path of the teacher that gave rise to this religion. So if I seek to evoke in you the peaceful Rabbi Jesus, I need to do it by breaking with many things associated with Christianity or Christendom, to go back to a now unpopular word which was dominant for many centuries. I need to break with your images of U.S. foreign policy as an expression of peaceful Rabbi Jesus, with patriarchy and hierarchy, with colonialism and imperialism. And I would have to tell a story about a Jewish rabbi who so deeply steeped in Torah, so deeply steeped in the idea of the kingdom of God in an occupied nation, found in the beautiful teachings of Tanakh, of Hebrew Bible, a manifestation of the face of God, the living and active prophetic God, and who spoke in that name. One who said that what the law teaches is to submit all of who you are, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and strength and mind. And appealing to Leviticus, who said, and learn to love your neighbor as yourself. And quoting the rabbinical school, he said, in this is contained all the law. How could we have lost that Jewish Jesus? Right? And the story I would have to tell would be the story of a religion which knew that at first. It said, the writer of the Gospel of John said, quoting Jesus in his final talk, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you, therefore be not afraid. And one would have to recognize that in the beginning of the church, the book of Acts 2 and 4, they describe how the followers of this Jesus, they call themselves just the people of the way. Beautiful, huh? The people of the way. Shared all things in common. And whenever anyone had a need, they shared it with him or her. And there's the peaceful side of Christianity. I mean, it wasn't long before somebody put a cross and a flag and marched, took boats across a river and destroyed an army and said, this is the victorious Christ. And then we created an emperor whom we call the Pope. But back in the core of our tradition, I mean, you can take any part of it and try to see it. I beg you, try to see it through the lens of that peaceful rabbi. We take the sentence, God was in Christ, reconciling the world and himself. Right? And that's used to separate Christians as a chosen people from all else. But what if you took the idea of reconciliation from that sentence, and you said, if one follows this rabbi, then we work to reconcile with all others. Do you understand? To change the entire emphasis. In the book of Acts, it says, God in whom we live and move and have our being. What if we saw God as the presence in whom we find that relationship of inner peace, peace with our community, and peace with the broader world? So my call would be to find those original teachings which have been covered over by so many layers that clearly move in another direction.
So Vern, I wanted to ask you, what do we do when in our own community texts and practices are used? I think all traditions have some culpability in this. What do we do when those very sacred texts are utilized in the name of violence? What is the reaction? What is the response? What are the resources that we draw upon? And how do we deal with that? I mean, that's kind of the reality. We're here talking about religion, and is peace between and within religions possible? Part of the question is not just that there's so much violence between religions, but sometimes throughout history, some of the most difficult situations have been between people of the same traditions. Mediators, we talk about it in a way that those who have some kinship or share property or share some affinity are actually often the most violent with each other. It's not people from whom we have a faraway connection, but it's those that are closest to us. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think we have to first understand that there are many authentic articulations of each religious faith, not just a singular one, and that reading a text is by nature an act of interpretation. Some people say, oh, I have a literal reading, or I have a metaphorical, or I have an allegorical. But the reality is no one is able to read every text literally. Everyone focuses on certain aspects of certain texts, or often because they agree with those aspects or what have you. So the fact of the matter is we should feel proactive in creatively interpreting text. That's what the history of texts have been. And we should also be creative with the differences within each tradition. Phil told me there's over 30,000 denominations of Christianity. There are many, many different types of Hinduisms. There are different types of Islams and Judaisms. So I think we have to be comfortable with pluralism, not just in an interfaith capacity, but also in an intra-faith capacity. And we can find that a creative reinterpretation of text that fits the milieu that we live in can get us to where we want to be in terms of peace building and reconciliation. The way we interpret the U.S. Constitution at its inception and the way we interpret it now isn't necessarily different. It has to be different. Texts have to be malleable, otherwise they're irrelevant. If the texts that have been successful in terms of enduring over time have been so because they're open to multiple interpretations. They're vague enough and malleable enough that they can reflect the milieu and the people who are interpreting them at the time. I think a good example of this is the Bhagavad Gita, perhaps the holiest text for Hindus. We don't have a Bible, but if we did, this would be, I guess, our Bible. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, the literal interpretation of the text is Krishna, who is God incarnate, comes down to earth and tells Arjuna, a warrior, to go kill his cousins in the battlefield. Arjuna is on the battlefield. He's feeling reluctant. He says to Krishna, why do I have to go kill my cousins? You know, as religious people, we would ask the same question. Why would you go to war at all, or especially against your own family? And Krishna says, no, it is your duty to go and do this as a warrior, all right? So that is a very militaristic, martial reading of the text. If you read it literally, it's unavoidable that you could support some kind of violence. But what Gandhi did, and this text was the most important text for Gandhi, he wrote more about the Bhagavad Gita than any other topic or text or subject in his entire life. He read it every single day. And how does he interpret this text? He says, no, the battlefield is the battlefield of your own heart. And the war that you have to fight between good and evil is happening within you. It's an introspective